Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're stepping into the shadows, really, to talk about the Lockheed F-117 Nighthawk.
Ah, yes, the stealth fighter, though we'll get into that name later.
Exactly. It's one of those aircraft that was, a pure rumor and speculation for years, a real icon of secrecy and, well, revolutionary tech for its time.
Absolutely. And to really get under the skin of the Nighthawk, we've pulled together some great resources.
Right.
We're looking at stuff from the Evergreen Museum, especially its role in Desert Storm. There's also a pretty interesting Reddit discussion comparing early stealth with what we see now.
Okay.
Plus, excerpts from the Pentagonist book on the F-117, the usual comprehensive Wikipedia page, and a good breakdown from how stuff works, too.
So a good mix of sources. Our mission today, then, is to sort of unpack the whole story of this plane.
Yeah, from its hidden beginnings in the black world right through its operational life, the ups and downs.
And it's kind of wild to think it first flew way back in 1981.
1981.
And the public didn't even know it existed for almost 10 years after that. So let's start there with that initial period, that decade of darkness. Why was it kept so incredibly secret?
Well, the level of secrecy was just intense. As the Evergreen Museum piece points out, even after they got the first unit up and running in '83, it flew only at night.
Only at night.
For 10 years.
For a full decade. Think about that.
Yeah.
Its entire early operational life happened in the dark. It just shows how groundbreaking they knew this tech was and, how vital it was to keep it hidden.
It definitely builds the mystique, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which makes its big reveal, its sort of public debut during Desert Shield and Desert Storm, even more dramatic.
Oh, absolutely. That period, 90 to 91, that was its moment.
The goal was stopping Saddam Hussein in Kuwait, right?
Primarily, yes. But the really amazing part isn't just that it was there, it's how it performed.
Unprecedented survivability, that's the phrase that jumps out. Exactly. The Evergreen source highlights this. Not one F-117 was hit, shot down, or even had a major mechanical failure that caused it to abort a mission during the entire Gulf War.
That's staggering, especially considering the targets they were hitting.
Right, because these weren't milk runs. They were going after Iraqi command and control, crucial communication nodes, and maybe most critically, suspected nuclear and chemical weapons sites.
Heavily defended targets, presumably.
You bet. So being able to hit those with precision again and again without taking any losses, that completely changed the game in air warfare. It makes you ask, okay, how is that possible?
Which leads us nicely to that famous name, the stealth fighter.
Yeah.
But like you hinted, our sources say that's a bit of a misnomer. It wasn't really a fighter jet in the traditional sense.
No, not at all. Its main job was attack, ground attack. The core idea behind it, the absolute driving principle, was minimizing its radar cross-section, RCS.
Right, making it hard to see on radar.
Extremely hard. The book excerpts get into the physics a bit. To cut the detection range by a factor of 10, you need to slash the RCS by a factor of 10,000.
Wow. That's a 40 decibel reduction.
Exactly. And the Skunkworks team, led really by electronic engineers more than traditional aerodynamicists for this aspect, designed the F-117 specifically for that massive reduction. Stealth wasn't about winning dogfights, it was about not being seen in the first place so it could deliver its weapons.
So less about mixing it up with enemy planes, more about sneaking through the back door to hit a specific spot.
Precisely. That surgical strike capability, which the Pentagonist book really stresses, was key. Hitting high-value, heavily defended targets with incredible accuracy, and crucially, minimizing collateral damage.
Which was a huge deal.
A capability nothing else really had at the time. And it shows you the trade-offs they made in early stealth, focusing almost entirely on signature reduction, maybe at the expense of having lots of onboard sensors, for example. A lesson learned for later designs, for sure.
And the place where this all happened, the legendary Area 51.
Ah, yes, that adds another layer of mystique, doesn't it?
Definitely.
The whole development in the black world, the testing out there in Nevada under top secret SCI classification, it's classic Cold War stuff. The book mentions the public reveal in 1988. People were just stunned by how it looked.
This is so angular.
Totally angular. Everyone had imagined sleek, curved, futuristic shapes for a stealth plane, and then they unveil this thing that looks like, well, a collection of flat panels.
I love that story about the test pilot, Dave Ferguson,
Yeah.
asking about icing on that faceted design.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
Apparently, he asked the chief aerodynamicist if ice buildup would mess up the aerodynamics, and the guy just deadpanned, it'll probably improve it.
Huh. Classic Skunk Works humor. But it does point to how, unusual the design drivers were. Aerodynamics took a backseat to signature.
So those facets, those flat panels were key to the stealth.
Absolutely fundamental.
Yeah.
The idea was to deflect incoming radar waves away from the radar source rather than scattering them randomly or reflecting them straight back, like a tilted mirror.
That Reddit discussion we looked at has some interesting points comparing it to later stealth, like mentioning Northrop's edge treatments.
Right, the sort of triangular ram patterns you see on the leading edges of wings on newer planes like the E-2 or F-22, often a slightly different color.
What's the idea there?
It's about a more gradual transition for the radar energy hitting the edge, using specific RAM radar absorbent material configurations. The F-117 used RAM extensively too, but the faceting was its primary shaping technique.
And the Reddit thread also mentioned how sensors were integrated differently later on.
Yeah, that's a key difference. Think about the B-2 bomber. Its radar, the APQ-181, and its defensive systems, their apertures, the openings are designed to be almost perfectly flush with the skin and angled very carefully.
To minimize reflections from the sensors themselves.
Exactly. The F-117, in contrast, was notable for not having a lot of sophisticated built-in sensors. Again, that focus was laser sharp on just reducing the signature above almost all else.
So it was truly groundbreaking, but definitely a first-generation effort. It paved the way, taught a lot of lessons.
No doubt about it.
Now, Desert Storm was obviously its shining moment. But what about other operations? Did it always perform so flawlessly?
Well, the picture gets a bit more complex when you look beyond the Gulf War. Its actual combat debut was Operation Just Cause in Panama back in '89.
Right.
But as the book notes, stealth wasn't really a factor there. Panama didn't have a sophisticated air defense radar network. The mission was more about shock and awe, trying to stun and confuse the Panamanian forces.
And it didn't go perfectly smoothly, as I recall.
No, the results were a bit mixed. Not quite the seamless invisible insertion people might have expected based on its reputation later.
Okay. Then came the Balkans, Operation Allied Force. How did it fare there?
That was a much tougher environment than Iraq in '91. The sources point out that electronic countermeasures ECM, jamming support was less available or comprehensive, and target selection was often really constrained by political factors, making predictable flight paths potentially more of an issue. It wasn't the same wide-open success story as Desert Storm.
And tragically, that's where the F-117's perfect combat record ended.
Yes. As multiple sources confirm, one F-117, call sign Vega 31, was shot down over Serbia by an SA-3 surface-to-air missile, an older Soviet system, actually.
Which really drove home the point that stealth isn't invisibility.
Exactly. It massively reduces the chance of detection and tracking, but it doesn't eliminate it, especially if the adversary gets lucky or uses unconventional tactics or even just older, lower-frequency radar that the design wasn't optimized against.
That loss must have sent ripples through the community.
Oh, absolutely. It was a stark reminder that technology is a constant cat-and-mouse game. Stealth gives you an edge, a big one, but it's not magic.
And the F-117 kept flying after that.
It did. It served in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. It was even involved in the opening strikes of OIF in 2003, trying to hit Saddam Hussein himself in Baghdad.
Ah, the decapitation strike. Which missed.
Which missed him, yes. But the aircraft continued to perform valuable strike missions. Still, the loss over Serbia was definitely a sobering lesson.
Let's dig a bit deeper into some of the specific tech that made it work. Radar absorbent material, RAM. That sounds crucial.
Oh, absolutely vital. The book describes RAM as being like, well, a sponge for radar waves. Instead of reflecting the energy, it absorbs it, converts it to tiny amounts of heat.
Okay. But it wasn't simple.
No, because they developed and used different types of RAM over the years, applied in different ways. This apparently made maintenance a real headache and very expensive.
Right.
They eventually ran the SCF-7 program, Single Configuration Fleet 7, to try and standardize the RAM across all the jets, make it easier to maintain. But developing RAM that was effective and durable enough to stick to an airplane flying at high speeds was a huge challenge.
And those engine inlets, the egg crate grills, that seemed like a really clever bit of engineering.
It really was. Ed Lovick's design. The book explains how those grids, made of fiberglass coated with resistive stuff, acted like waveguides at radar frequencies.
Waveguides?
Yeah, they basically channeled the radar waves, absorbing them before they could hit the highly reflective engine compressor blades deep inside and bounce back out.
So air gets in, radar doesn't get out.
Pretty much. Apparently, Lovick had used a similar idea on the vents for the A-12, the precursor to the SR-71 Blackbird.
Fascinating. And the exhaust system was just as carefully designed, wasn't it? For both radar and heat signature.
Definitely. They used that very wide, flat exhaust nozzle, the slot convergent
A
nozzle.
Pladra's tail.
Huh, yeah, it looked a bit like that. That shape helped reduce rear aspect radar reflections, but critically, it spread the hot exhaust gas over a wider area.
Could cool it down faster.
Exactly. Mix it with bypass air drawn from around the engine. Lowering the infrared, the heat signature, was just as important as lowering the radar signature. That flat shield at the very end, the bill, helped shield both radar and IR from below.
Though maybe not from above.
Right, there was a trade-off. It might have radiated a bit more heat upwards, but the thinking was most threats, especially ground-based missiles, would be looking from below or behind. An acceptable compromise.
It's just incredible how every part of the design seems dictated by stealth.
Yeah.
Literally every angle, every material.
It really was a single-minded focus, which makes it interesting that internally a lot of the subsystems were apparently off-the-shelf components.
Oh, why was that?
Well, likely to keep costs down and reduce development risk. You know, if you're designing such a radical airframe and exterior, maybe using proven avionics, flight controls from other aircraft like the F-16 or F-A-18, makes sense.
But the avionics did get updated over time, right? It wasn't static.
Oh, for sure. The OCIP, the Offensive Capability Improvement Program, rolled out upgrades in phases. Phase I gave it better computers, let it use newer weapons like the GBU-27 laser-guided bomb, effectively.
Bunker buster.
The very same. Later phases brought in things like color cockpit displays, a big upgrade from the original monochrome and GPS navigation. That was the RNIP Plus upgrade.
And real-time threat updates.
Yeah, the IRCA program. That allowed the pilot to get updated threat information and even replan parts of the mission dynamically in flight. Big boosts to situational awareness and flexibility.
So it definitely evolved quite a bit internally over its service life.
Constantly adapting. And the weapons delivery system itself was unique, too. That internal bay with the trapeze that lowered the weapon out.
To keep the bomb bay doors open for the minimum time.
And to ensure clean separation while keeping everything tucked away internally, otherwise to maintain that low observable profile. Theoretically, it could carry various weapons, but mostly it was used for bombs.
Okay, so eventually newer stealth planes started coming online. The B-2 bomber, the F-22 fighter, that spelled the end for the Nighthawk.
Pretty much, yes. Its capabilities, while revolutionary in the 80s, were being surpassed. The fleet was consolidated at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico for its later years.
And then retirement. When did that happen?
Yeah. The official shutdown started around 2007, with the last operational flights in 2008. But interestingly, they didn't go to the famous boneyard at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base like most retired military planes.
No? Why not?
Because of the classification surrounding its materials and technologies, even in retirement. They were flown back to the Tonopah Test Range, where the program started, essentially, and put into secure storage.
Still secret even when they were done flying.
Some aspects, yes. Shows how sensitive that tech was considered.
And just for the record, which Air Force units actually flew the F-117?
The main ones were initially the 4450th Tactical Group at Tonopah, which later became the 37th Tactical Fighter Wing. Then operations shifted to the 49th Fighter Wing at Holloman. The specific squadrons were the 7th, 8th, and 9th Fighter Squadrons, often known as the Bandits, with their individual numbers.
Got it. And finally, a little piece of trivia, it even ended up as a logo for a football team.
Huh. Yeah, the Omaha Nighthawks in the UFL for a while shows the kind of cultural impact it had, even if people didn't fully understand it. That angular shape became iconic.
It really did. So wrapping this up, what are the key takeaways from our dive into the F-117?
Well, I think it's clear it was truly revolutionary. It proved stealth technology worked and could provide a massive tactical advantage. Desert Storm was its undeniable validation.
But it wasn't invincible.
No. Later operations showed the challenges, the evolving threats, and the fact that stealth is a complex equation, not a simple cloak. And the constant upgrades show that even revolutionary platforms need continuous improvement.
It really stands as this fascinating moment where aerospace engineering pushed boundaries in a very specific, very focused direction. Makes you think about that balance, doesn't it? Between gaining a technological edge and how quickly adversaries adapt, how warfare itself changes.
Absolutely. A constant cycle.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Lockheed F-117 Nighthawk. We really hope you found it interesting.
Yeah, it was great digging into this one.
And hey, if you did enjoy this discussion, maybe consider hitting that like button, sharing it, or subscribing to the channel.
It really does help us keep these deep dives coming. Your support lets us spend the time researching and putting these together.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks again for listening.